All right, guys, shut this off. Just got back from the shooting range, indoor range, 25 yards, about 400 rounds, chronoed them. And yeah, I want to show you guys. This video is going to be for the guys who, I should say the guys who have a lot of pellets. Maybe you got pellets, slugs, you got a new gun, you want to get the best optimum use of your time, money, air, and narrow things down, because the new ways that we've been kind of, tuning things are very tedious. I want to give you a cut and dry 3-step method for tuning your gun. The third part is this way, eliminating all the junk, pellets, and slugs very quickly. And that. So let's get down in the basement. I'll show you some of the results from the 400 shots that I took at the range and kind of, give you a method to the madness in that. All right, now that we're back downstairs, let's go over this real quick. We mentioned in the car, going to the gun range inside, about 400 shots. But before we get into the details of the method to the madness of kind of the quick way to do this, let's kind of go over some of the things that have, I guess, progressed in the industry that's kind of pushed us away from common sense. And that's the slug industry as in general. So a lot of places you go, you get a new gun and you look at the slugs and you call someone and you're like, oh, those javelins need to run hot. They need to run at 980 or 1020. And then you talk to another group and you get some FX slugs, which are hybrids, and they need to run at 920 or 960, and the gamut's everywhere. Nielsen's has their special areas where they want to run, and then you get to pellets, which are a lot less fussy. And so this makes it very complicated. And looking at tuning the gun, what makes it so tedious is the fact that a lot of people try to bite off way too much all at once. Give you a typical example of something that happens. You get a new gun, or you want to change the barrel, and you want a new caliber change. So you go to the gun range at, let's say, 50 yards. My gun range is 50 yards outdoors, and you have to deal with the distance, and then you have to deal with wind. You have to deal with a bunch of other things in your gun, and the tuning, and the slugs, and the feet per second. So unfortunately, what people do, and I'm guilty of this, is you get set up at 50 yards, and then you get your new slug in where they say it's supposed to be the feet per second, and all of a sudden you start messing with all your dials. You start putting it in at, your regulator pressures. Well, if I'm shooting, Zans, or I'm shooting javelins, I need to up the pressure to get the speed up. And then you play with that, and you get your groupings, and then you go back to, let's say, some FX hybrids. Well, they like to be slower, so you have to readjust your gun. And then you play with the pellets, and then you play with some Nielsen slugs, and they all have this different bandwidth of ranges that are supposed to be the most efficient and supposed to be, work through the gun optimal. But there's an issue. It's tedious and it takes time, and you spend a lot of air, and sometimes you have to dereg your gun or depressurize your gun and all that. This creates a lot of things. It's too much all at once. So I'm proposing this, and I might have mentioned earlier, I want you to shoot just whatever your gun has, and if it's even untuned, all the better. Yeah, I'll say that again. If your gun's untuned, all the better. Because there's really kind of 3 areas that you need to look at when you're looking at tuning your air gun. First is the barrel. The barrel and the slug matchups. Now, I tested about 9 different pellet slug combinations to try to get the optimal slug/pellet for the air gun. But there's 3 areas. There's the barrel. Does the pellet or slug like the barrel? And then the second stage of tuning and optimization is the power plant. You have the plenum, the bottle, the feet per second. Can you narrow that down and get within the bandwidth you need? And then the third part is the micro adjustments. This little back knob here, which gets to your extreme spread. So it kind of goes this way. Barrel tuning, does your slug like the barrel initially? Once it does, then you bring it into your feet per second, you narrow that down, you get that optimized, and then you really start cranking in the micro adjustments to get your extreme spread. So how does this work? If you get to a gun range of, say, 25 yards, it becomes a lot easier because you remove a lot of the variances, especially indoor. You can do this maybe in your basement if you have a huge basement, maybe your backyard. Get it away from wind. I went to the gun range. There's no wind. The wind's not blowing my gun. The wind's not blowing the pellets. 25 yards, and then I start shooting groups. And what that does is it removes a lot of this stuff in the back end, the feet per second and the extreme spread, because you're shooting such a short distance, it doesn't matter. Now, in some of my results, I have 300 on the chrono, probably 400 total. The extreme spread went by, 800 up to 1,000, and it was, still shooting in the same hole, and that's great. So a little bit of a philosophy here. I know a lot of people want to tune the gun specifically for, let's say, Zan slugs or the javelins at 980, but the problem is it's finicky, right? Like, do you really want your barrel to only accept that projectile at 980? What happens if it shoots at 970? What happens to 960? What happens when your gun's warm, you need to take it out in 5 below temperature, and it's got a bunch of air that compresses? A lot of times people don't realize, but when your gun's, let's say, -5 degrees or -5 degrees Celsius or whatever, it has a little bit different tune. And if you find a pellet or slug that is fussy like that, you're only going to make things worse. So the premise is this: put it in a vise, put it really lock solid, lock it down, and start shooting groups at 24. Don't even care about the extreme spread, because it doesn't matter that much with the point of impact. Just look at the holes and the groups that it's going to leave, and then find out what pellet likes your barrel, what barrel likes your pellet, and what's the most tolerant, because that's what you want to go with. Now, there are people that will say, well, you just have to work the slug into the barrel and just work it enough and you can tune it. And that's, accurate to a degree, but just going through my experience, if you're fighting a downhill battle already, you can maybe get the groups smaller. But there's usually something in your gun, your pellet slug, that your gun's gonna like. And I'll show you some results here of the differences between the groups, because it's dramatic. People say, well, if you're freehanding, it's not, you won't be able to tell. But ideally, indoor range, I know I can shoot just a round hole with any kind of, pretty much any caliber, 10 shots, and it's not going to variance. The thing is, notice in some of these shots of some of these slugs in an untuned gun where the extreme spread is, let's say, 70 feet per second, it's the same hole anyway. But a lot of times I'd look and I'd see a big difference, a big shift point of impact, and that would tell me pretty much like this gun, this barrel does not like these slugs, no matter what. I shot them anywhere from 800 all the way up to 1,050. They're all over the place. And a lot of times when you're looking over the chrono, you're sitting there, it's 983. 983 again, and you have a huge difference in point of impact. You just know immediately, this barrel does not like these slugs for consistency. So let me put this away and let me show you some of the results that I got, and we'll kind of wrap things up. All right, let's break this down. Sorry, it's gonna be noisy. Let's look at some of the shots with the Nielsen. I have 9. And I've actually got it down to 3 of the top ones. But let's go with the biggest, the heaviest, kind of on down. So I got some Nielsen 20 grainers, 177. This gun, the Maverick was tuned for a 30 cal, so it's shooting pretty hot. But what I noticed is, off here, this is a pretty big spread, believe it or not, for 25 yards. It should be pretty much one hole. And even in an untuned gun, it should do some well. And then I kept fiddling with a little bit of power adjustments, and it even opened up worse. You can see here, it's just walking all over the 20 grainers. And then essentially I started shooting the 15 grainers, the Nielsen 15 grainers. They got a little bit closer. They kind of came in, 15 grain. And then I went to the Nielsen and Howlers. They're kind of the same. They even down here, I'll show you guys. They got a little bit closer. The groups got a little bit closer, and I started noticing this. And this, I'm gonna put this away. This is one of the things I noticed with the 177 calibers. Like these big heavy slugs, they just don't seem to fly all that great in the 177 caliber. There's an optimal blend, which I had noticed from my day states, and it carries over to the FX, is about 13 grains. And I kind of expected this. So going from 12 grain slugs, I went to 16 grain, the Beast, the heavy, what is these? The Beast Diablos. These are 16 grain. And you'll see them, where are those? You'll see it open up some more. You'll see these open up, just a heavier slug and that. And again, 16 grain. It kind of has a little bit of tattering on the paper, like it might even be keyholing at that. But yeah, so I put those aside. So right there out of 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's like 5 of them that just kind of went bye-bye. But the thing is, then I went to the 10 grain. 10 grain started opening, it started putting it in the same hole. And that was just about any speed. When I looked at the chrono, it was going anywhere from about 880 to 1050. 1050. That's a 200 feet spread, but looking at it's putting it in the same hole. Yeah, that's kind of cool stuff. And then, let me see. Yep. And essentially, I put the 13 grainers in here, and you can see 13 grain, they're almost one hole. They're almost one hole. They're dancing around a little bit, but initially at the last one I put in the JSB 10.2s, and it is essentially one hole at 25 yards. One of those, two of those. And the funny thing is the 10 grain, the 10.2 grain pellets and the 10 grain slugs were running anywhere from like 850 to 1,060 or something like that. And I was still getting good groups. And the 13 grainers were running roughly the same. They were all over the place because I'd turn up the max, turn it down, just play with it to see what would happen. And the point of impact wouldn't change that much at 25 yards. What that tells me is the fact that these guys, the 10.2s to a lesser extent, but the 13 grainers, the 13.4 knockouts are the most tolerant to the barrel for changes. And then the Diablo pellets, these 10.2s, will go through an enormous amount of flux. What we want to do next is narrow that down. Start looking at the bandwidth of maybe we shoot them at 880, 920, 960, and see what the best groups are. Then we tweak with the micro adjustment and back. But that's the beauty of it. The fact that this gun will still shoot really well with these slugs at just about any speed is what you're looking for. Because when you go out in the cold, your gun's going to change. Outside of being in perfect, pristine conditions, there's nothing worse than having an ammo or a round in your gun that it needs 965.5 feet per second. Then you have to ask yourself, what's going to happen to that round when it gets down range and it starts slowing down? Is it going to destabilize very quick? That kind of stuff. But it shows at least it's coming out of the barrel through these tests, about 400 rounds, comparing them. At least it's consistent. And there's some other ways, you can kind of push again. You can kind of push the slugs to maybe get a little tighter. But this is all about like an untuned gun. You get a decent group, fair group, and then you start niddling it down. So if you start with a bad slug, yeah, you can make it a little tighter, but it's not going to be nearly as tight as the good stuff. I hope this helps, guys, making things, because you can basically go through within a half day 20 different slugs, 20 different rounds, and just start plugging holes. You could put your gun in a vise, just shoot. I shot probably about 30 to 40 rounds of each pellet and slug, and just started looking at the groups, playing with the speed and that, and nothing really jumped out. But the overall feeling, you get the feeling of the barrel, that's what jumps out. And then it's fine tuning. So the way I look at it for tuning your gun, 50% of the battle, that 50% is finding the right slug and pellet. The other 40% is getting the right feet per second, meaning like 880, 980, whatever you want to run. And the last 10% is getting that extreme spread. Just go in there, tweak it just a little bit. That's the gold mine piece. But you could still shoot exceptionally well if your extreme spread is, let's say, 20 or something or below. It's not that bad, within reasonable ranges. We're seeing a lot on the net where people want to push 2 feet, 3 feet, 5 feet extreme spread, but these are like bench rest guys. These are the guys that, every little ounce counts, and they will go through the extreme amount of pressure and testing for everything to see the optimal. But 98% of the people, they're not going to want to do that. You can get just as close and save yourself a lot of money, a lot of air, and a lot of ammo by just listening to your gun, seeing the results downrange of what is not less pellet fussy or slug fussy, and just go with that. Anyway, guys, hope this helps. Comments, questions below, and I'll see you next week.